Is it a guy who looks like he's 50 or a girl who looks like she's 15? Those are the dangers, right? So you can have things moderated before or after they go up. You can also, I'm just going to skip one and come back, go to abuse reports. So an abuse report, if you don't know, is when people flag something as being inappropriate. When something's flagged as being inappropriate, all those things will be aggregated, and whoever's paying attention to your site is going to be able to read through them and make the decision based on the client, not based on the readers. So that's an abuse report. Monitoring comes into play. Monitoring is a crucial part of having a social media page. So part of your strategy has to be monitoring. It means listening to what people are saying about you online. So that doesn't necessarily just mean your Facebook page or your website or community forums. It means Twitter. It means LinkedIn. It means anywhere that people can have a conversation online. So that's an important aspect, monitoring. Community management. Community management is when you have someone, a person, or a team dedicated to your page. So this is someone who knows your brand in and out. This is someone who knows everything that a brand would want to be saying and wouldn't want to be saying, what would be acceptable, what wouldn't be acceptable, what the brand's messaging is. This is a key person to your moderation and risk management, is that you have someone who knows your brand as well as you know your brand, as well as the owner of that company knows the brand. And they're taking care of your stuff online. If you have to worry about your social media every day, it's not going to go well. I can tell you that right now. Social media policy. This is one I really like because it talks about internal, not just external. Everyone's worrying all the time about what other people are going to say about your brand, but sometimes we forget about the people that work within that brand, okay? So I work for ICUC, and I can very easily tweet something about ICUC that's really negative, and that puts ICUC's brand in jeopardy. It puts us at risk. So a social media policy is an internal document that explains to your staff, your employees, your contractors, what they should be saying, what they shouldn't be saying. And again, you don't want to necessarily be controlling everybody, but you definitely want them to have an idea of what's appropriate and what's not. So that's another way to manage your risks online. Not only your customers, not only your prospective customers, but your actual staff. They put you at risk as well. Okay, so why bother minimizing your risk? Why not just have a free-for-all online? What's the big deal? Well, people who don't plan pay for not having a plan. So the things that really are a reason to be proactive about your minimizing your risk is that you guys are gonna, what happens on a page is if you have a lot of negative comments or you have a lot of inappropriate content, is that you're gonna lose credibility as a brand. Going back to Disney, if I'm Disney and I have pornography up on the site and I just leave it there, what are parents gonna think? Are they going to want their kids to start watching Disney movies? Probably not, right? Would you? I wouldn't. I don't have kids, but I doubt I would. You can lose customers over this. When you're getting a lot of spam on your pages, it seems like nothing to you. You may be immune to it even now. I get a lot of spam in my email, on my Facebook pages, on client pages. I see them all the time. They're just random links to UGG boots, to a holiday vacation for $200 or something silly like that. It's fine if I see it once in a while, but if all I'm seeing is a whole bunch of spam on pages, then I'm not going to go back to that page ever because it's just a whole bunch of garbage. It's not giving me any original content. It's not relevant to me. I don't want to see it. So there's so much noise coming in at people today that we have to be careful about how much we're letting people hear. Because if it's not worth their while, they're going to leave. And the last one is that you're going to lose customer interaction. So a really big part of moderation, community management, monitoring is that engagement with fans. If we're not talking to our customers, then they're not going to bother talking to us. And we want our customers talking to us online because of word of mouth, because of feedback. It improves our products. It improves our customer service. Right? You guys are looking a little stunned. Here's another tweet for you. If you're not sure what to tweet, tweet it out. Okay, so don't forget about the fans. What I was just saying, set it and forget it is not a motto of social media. You can't just hope for the best. You can't just assume it's just going to happen. You have to pay attention to your pages. You can't set up a Facebook page, set up a Twitter account, and leave it alone. You can't tweet once a year. If I see someone that's tweeted once and it happened last year, I'm not going to follow that person. They're not interesting enough for me. So why can't we set it and forget it? Well, it keeps fans, we want to keep fans up to date with consistent content. We want to respond to customer inquiries. That's a great way to use it. We want to encourage engagement and drive discussion. Customers, fans, whatever you want to call them, they're what's keeping your brand alive. You want people talking about your brand. They're not going to talk about you if you're boring or you're not there. They'll have nothing to talk about. So give them something to talk about. Okay, Winnipeg, here's some amazing stats for you. You may not know these. I'm just going to read them to you because they're pretty outstanding, I think. 92% of marketers are using Facebook. These are all 2011 stats. 75% plan on increasing their activities. 2/3 of the global internet population visit social networks. 2/3. That's a lot. 93% of social media users believe a company should have a presence in social media. 93. If you don't have one, you're missing out on 93%. 85% of social media users believe that a company should go further than just having a presence on social sites and should also interact with customers. Like John already said, social media is word of mouth on steroids. Steroids. Okay, this might be the shocker to you guys. I checked out some of your Facebook pages, and here's some comments that I found that you guys probably don't want up there. So you guys are not immune. Thinking that it won't be your page is incorrect. So profanity, there's some political content that I think that site probably wouldn't want up there. When's the last time you checked your Facebook page? Mess happens. I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples. These are some interesting ones that I found in the past little while. So, this brand called Summer's Eve, they make body wash. They make for women. So they did a beauty ad campaign, and they did a campaign surrounded around the idea of women getting raises, so being paid the same amount as men. That was the concept that they did. And they gave sort of a 6-step way to do this. And misunderstood or not, the first step was to, and this might make you uncomfortable, but I'm going to say it, wash your vagina. That was the first step, using their products. Yikes. That was step number 1. You can imagine the backlash that incurred online. I'll just read you one off of here that I like. It says, "Want a raise? Question mark. Wash your vagina." Not very nice. Okay, so this is a big risk, right? Ad campaigns go wrong all the time. It happens. Brands make mistakes. That happens. This is a pretty bad one. Someone probably should have thought about that for a second before they put it up, but it happens. So, are you prepared for something like this to go bad with your brand? You better be, because this got a huge response online. They had to take the campaign down, obviously. They had to create an entire session speaking to women about how to become equivalent to men. And it all happened online. Number 2, this is an actual one from just yesterday from a client of ours, Disney. So I won't read it for you, but we can't think that we're not going to be at risk just because we have a nice brand. Just because our brand is for kids, or just because our brand is about dresses, and there's nothing wrong with dresses, someone will find something wrong with dresses. Trust me. They do every day, and here's a good example of it. Here's another one that I really like. This is one that happened to a couple of people actually in the past few months. It's from Chrysler Autos, and this is a good lesson for Twitterers. When you work in social media, you often have a lot of Twitter accounts. I know personally that I run 3. So this can happen. Chrysler Auto sent out a tweet that said, "I find it ironic that Detroit is known as the Motor City, and yet no one here knows how to fucking drive." That came from Chrysler. Not appropriate language, probably, right? The brand, you can see, was embarrassed. There were thoughts of it being a hacker. They first announced immediately and sent out their own tweet that their Twitter account had been compromised, is the word that they used, compromised. So there was a lot of stuff online asking whether they had been hacked. But of course the truth always comes out. And the truth was that a poor intern had been signed into the Chrysler account instead of his own account, which happens to the best of us, but has a huge effect online. So social media risks, social media policies, moderating content, having the right people in charge. Look at that, another tweet. Tweet it out, people. I'm gonna read this one because it's my favorite one. "Don't be the last Winnipegger to know. It's time to get on board with social media. If you're not already, if you are doing it and you're not sure what you're doing, ask questions." Thanks for listening, everybody. That's it. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Alicia. I got a couple things I want to add to Alicia's discussion today. Just kind of being prepared with policies and procedures. Referred to a real-life experience back when we first started the business. When we weren't prepared, didn't really have any policies and procedures. I'm sitting in my house in South Winnipeg, myself working away, moderating text messages for Punch Much from Much Music before they're going on TV. 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting there and this message comes in and it's, this kid says he's going to kill himself. I'm like, oh, that's not very good. So what do, right? It's 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting in Winnipeg in my little condominium in Southwood Green and I'm going, this kid's going to kill himself in Ottawa and I need to do something about it. So I picked up the phone and I called the RCMP. Now imagine that conversation. Yes, hello, my name's Keith Billis. I'm calling from Winnipeg, Fort Garry, and there's somebody in Ottawa that's going to kill himself. And the guy's like, who are you? Right? So long story short, we didn't have a policy or a procedure in place. Rewind just a number of days ago, client will remain unnamed. We received a note that they were going to blow up their amusement park. Right? Blow it up. We had an escalation procedure in place that had people notified at security and there was a process in place. So, it's great to engage in social, it's great to have your brand online, but if you're going to start, you can't stop, right? You got to consider that. There's an investment both economically, but there's also an investment in managing that social site, both Twitter, both Facebook, any microsite, anything you're doing. So once you start, you can't stop. So if you're not prepared to make that investment, don't even start, right? And you can't take this stuff lightly because stuff will happen. Right? You're going to get burned. If you're gonna play in social and you think that you're gonna moderate content yourself or you're gonna hire a service to help you, you're still gonna have issues. It's inevitable, right? There's something else. There's a second point I wanted to kind of reference that Alicia was talking about as well. We all remember what happened a couple weeks ago with Anthony Weiner, right? Know the difference between an @ reply and a direct message, right? It's as simple as that, right? Because you're going to eliminate the situations like Chrysler, and you're going to eliminate the situations like Mr. Anthony Weiner had a couple of weeks ago because he accidentally hit the @ reply instead of the direct message. So those are a couple of kind of anecdotes I wanted to share with you guys. The most important one is if you're going to get started in social, you can't stop, right? So it's a commitment you need to make. It's going to be an ongoing commitment, and it's one that you need to manage ongoing. Do you have any questions or comments?
Don't be shy. You don't have to come to the mic. You can just shout it out if you want. Oh.
This is cheating or not, but I have a question. Okay. What do you think about brands having their own voice on Twitter as opposed to having someone who works within the brand being that voice?
Okay. We might have different opinions, so I'm gonna go first. I think that a logo is just a logo. That's all it is. So I think it's great to have a Facebook page, and I think it's great to have a Twitter account, and ICUC actually has both of those things. But I think if people don't know the person behind it and they can't see who you are, then they can't relate to you. So I can't relate to a logo. I really just can't. So I do think that it's important to have a voice.
Yeah, I echo that, and I also say that make sure people are, I think, be clear. A couple things. Don't call yourself a social media expert in your bio, because people are going to look at you kind of weird. Secondly, make sure you have your bio filled out. And thirdly, be clear on what you're going to tweet about, because if you're a realtor and all you're going to do is push out tweets about your listings, how exciting is that, right? And if you're a retailer just pushing out sales, you're going about the wrong way, right? You want to build an audience. You want to build some engagement. You want to build some discussion. You want to get a conversation happening. Be a thought leader, right? Thought leaders eventually equal sales, right? So don't just be out there. Again, let's use the realtor example. If you're going to be out there just pushing out tweets about your listings, people are going to be probably unfollowing you very quick. But if you position yourself as a thought leader in the real estate industry, people are going to follow you, they're going to pay attention to you, they're going to retweet you, they're going to market for you. So the same thing goes to the brand. And as Alicia said, if you're just a brand who's going to stick a logo up there, if you're going to do it, ensure that you do still have a voice behind that logo. Any questions?
This is for Alicia. If you can't relate to logo, would you advise your clients to include who's the actual person tweeting behind that account in the bio?
I think it's definitely one way to go. Lots of people do it. I see it all the time. And typically when I see who it is behind the logo, so that was Mike, everybody, from Silo Mission. And if you guys, so for example, on your Facebook page or your Twitter account, you have the person who's writing those tweets. I usually go straight to that person's page. To be honest, that's my personal experience using it. It doesn't mean that I ignore the brand, because I think everybody wants to hear what the brand is saying. So yeah, I think if you want to put your name up and you feel comfortable with it, then definitely. But the idea of separating your personal tweets from your brand tweets doesn't sit well with me. I think that when I'm tweeting personally, I do tweet my personal life, but I also tweet ICUC stuff, and I also tweet industry relevant content. And I think they sort of go hand in hand. I don't have my name up personally on the Twitter page, the ICUC Twitter page, but I think that people aren't necessarily looking for that. They find me usually before they find the ICUC page, to be honest, because I'm talking about my brand, because it's what I do, it's what I live and breathe every day, so there's no reason not to talk about it personally. I'm not hiding anything.
There must be some more questions out there. I'm sure people are itching. You have one right over here.
For Alicia, you mentioned that you manage 3 different accounts, and I also manage 3 Twitter and additional 3 Facebook on Hootsuite, and so the Chrysler situation is scary, even though my personal tweets don't veer that way. But I'm just wondering if you have any tips or advice on managing multiple accounts.
Yeah, definitely. My best advice to you is double check, triple check, and quadruple check. I never send a tweet without looking at it and then looking away from my computer and looking at it again. If you don't see who you're signed in as, I don't want to say it's an honest, yes, sometimes it's an honest mistake, but you don't have to make those mistakes. You just have to be diligent about reading who you're signed in as. It's as simple as that. Another thing that I think works really well that I use is having 2 browsers open. So if I'm tweeting from the web, one of my browsers I know is dedicated to personal, so that's where my Gmail is open all day and those sorts of things. And my other browser is dedicated to my work stuff, so my ICUC Twitter account will be open there. My personal Twitter account will be open on the other browser.
One of the suggestions you might want to try is with TweetDeck. Schedule your tweets. So take one of your accounts and say, okay, all my business stuff is going to be scheduled, right? And you can have me sitting there in your outbox, looking at them going, okay, that's okay, right? So do them scheduled and have your personal stuff kind of on the fly. Anything else? think we all came here to learn. Social is about communicating, so right at the back there. Awesome.
If you're a large organization with a lot of different functional arms and a lot of different people in it, and you want to preserve your good name, then it's going to be really challenging, almost impossible, I think, to predict the range of engagement that you get from the public, especially if you're now experiencing feedback from people you've never engaged before, because suddenly through the anonymity potentially of the social media, they feel that they can have a voice. So part of, I guess, the social media policy has to be adaptive. But what has to be in place before you go live with this to try to get the majority of things under wraps, just so it doesn't become completely unmanageable for you?
Good question. So I think what you really, your internal social media policy needs to be very clear, right? As an organization, you can do one of two things. You can either encourage your employees to interact and be transparent, like we do at ICUC, or you can encourage them to not say nothing online, right? If you're going to allow them to communicate on behalf of the brand or mention the fact that they work at your company and so forth, make sure those policies are very clear inside the house and have that communication plan in place. When it comes to engaging externally with outside people, identify one or two individuals inside the house who are going to be those people that will be the ones that are going to be communicating externally, right? So I wouldn't advise having the entire organization communicating back to everybody. Again, sometimes we make social really confusing. At the end of the day, it's like a party line, right? It's a phone. It's just communicating with people. It's another channel. Would you normally let, if you're in a large organization, would you normally let everybody inside the house talk to everybody outside in public about the company? Probably not. There'll probably be a couple of people that are going to be speaking on behalf of the organization. I think the same thing relates to social, is that you have one or two people identified. And I also think you need to have ownership from the top. In my experience working with some of the companies we've been fortunate to work with, there's clear buy-in from the top with their employees that they want them to be engaged and they want them to really embrace the communication tools that they can use. And I'll tell you on our behalf, we don't recruit anymore. We don't spend any time looking and placing ads hiring. We built such a fun culture at ICUC that our team is constantly tweeting about their love for work or the stuff they're doing. People see that online and they search it out and they start sending resumes in. So a whole other way of driving people back to your business just by encouraging that transparency inside the house. Any more questions before we wrap up?
I'm just wondering, in your experience for all of your clients, if you've ever come across a situation where there are alternate Facebook pages that are use Disney as an example, and how you can sort of proactively let people know that they're maybe on the wrong page and they should be on the corporate one?
Good question. Some of you may or may not know, but there's many pages out there that are hijacked or are created by others. We had a call. I can tell you that we've in some of the deliverables we have for clients, and I'm looking at Jan over here. I don't know if we have any stuff where we're actually directing clients over to the right, to the right one. I can tell you that's a big problem. Let me kind of digress a little bit. We had a call with Thomson Reuters a few weeks ago, and the call was like, "Hey Keith, hey Jan, we're troubled the fact that there's these hundreds of Facebook pages out there that aren't ours." And you know what? And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so we listened to him, and then we did some research, and there was tons of Thomson Reuters pages out there that were not being managed by Thomson Reuters and giving a very negative impression to the public. Rewind 2 years ago, we got a call. We had the opportunity to work with Coca-Cola out of Atlanta. Fortunately, we won the business. The reason they had to get involved in social media was because their fans, two of their biggest fans in California, started up the Coca-Cola Facebook page without Coke's permission, and over time accumulated, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million fans, right? And Coke wasn't managing the page. It was a page managed completely by these fans. So Facebook called Coke and said, "You guys, either one of two things are going to happen. We're either going to shut the page down because this is clearly a brand page that's not being managed by the brand, and there's a lot of risks associated with that. Secondly, you guys got to moderate this stuff and get that page back from those two fans." So negotiations literally took place between Coca-Cola and these two super fans in California, and they relinquished ownership And I believe, from what we've heard, Coke gave them some stuff, but they relinquished ownership of this fan page over to Coca-Cola so that Coca-Cola could manage that page. And since then, some of the work we do for those little brands is looking for those pages that aren't theirs, and then notifying the brands that they can put a takedown notice over to Facebook.
Sorry, so it's a takedown notice?
To Facebook and have them shut down, right? Have those pages shut down. So often, kind of taking a point from there, social media audits, right? Again, before you might, as a larger brand, before you're going to perhaps engage in the space, you might want to do an audit of what's out there on behalf of your brand. There may have been people out there that have set up a Facebook page for, great Canadian shoes, and you may not know about it. Somebody may have set up a Twitter account, right? So I'm just referencing somebody I know we have in the room from earlier. So it's critical that you be aware that if there are people that are hijacking your brand, you do know about that. So, anything else?
I would also add to reach out to those people. I think there's no harm in talking to people and asking them nicely to just say, hey, can you put a note up that says you're not the actual brand? Most people will probably take the cue because nobody wants to have to take it to legal in the first place. I'm not sure. I know there was some negotiations with that Coke Facebook page, but I know that they were also happy to hand it over because they were such big fans. So I say reach out to people as well. It's not, it's just a tweet away. Anybody else? Question? Me personally, I've never, yeah. Do you know any examples where someone didn't want to give up their page? An anti-fan.
I know we often hear from people who take their comments down, right? So if you posted a comment on the CBC website or a TSN website and we may have removed it and people know that we moderate the comments, we get a lot of feedback about that, right? And it's not based on our guidelines, it's based on the client's guidelines, right? So people don't like when their stuff's taken down, for sure. Yeah. At the end there. Sure. Yeah. So the question is, there's a lot of great monitoring software on the market, right? What's good stuff? Now, one thing I do want to be clear on, there's the reputation management stuff like Reputation Tool or reputationmanagement.com. Those are services that are literally taking your username, like a person's username, and doing a search across social networks and checking your reputation. A little bit different than maybe some of the monitoring stuff. So with brands that are buying, who's heard of Radian 6 in this room? Show of hands, please. A few of you. Okay, so Radian 6 is a social media monitoring platform. Really the Microsoft Word of media monitoring platforms. They're a listening platform. What they do is they listen across the entire social web. They market themselves as a social phone, right? They listen to conversations across the entire social web, bring all that content in, aggregate it on a dashboard. There are hundreds of social media monitoring tools in the market today, literally. They're frankly a commodity at this point, which would explain probably why Radian 6 sold to Salesforce a couple of months ago. Radian 6 would be the benchmark, I would suggest to you, as probably the best social media monitoring tool. Sysomos is another great tool, recently acquired by MarketWire. Kind of difference between the two of them. Sysomos has great back history stuff. When we sell our services, we don't use one tool, we use a best of class tools, and they're always changing. So my recommendation is find one you like, because at the end of the day, most of them are pulling the same content. Find one you like, find one you're comfortable with, and work with it. Good question, though. Any more questions?
Just kind of curious, what kind of metrics can you use to determine your ROI using so many different types of social media? How do you put it all together and decide this is what I'm doing correctly?
I love the question of ROI in social media. Love it, love it, love it. Here's why I love it. How do you measure ROI and everything else? Right? Social is really just another channel as part of your marketing spend. Right? So when you look at your marketing spend and you say, what's my ROI in my marketing spend? Social's a piece of that. To sit back and say my return is X because I tweeted this or I Facebooked that or I liked this, I frankly think it's ridiculous. And I get tired when I have conversations with people weekly about, tell me the ROI, tell me the ROI. No disrespect to your question because I'm glad it came up. But it's just, again, we sometimes we think of social media as something more than what it really is. It's uploading photos, right? It's chatting on Twitter. It's posting, when we first started ICUC, the term social media didn't even exist. It was user-generated content. It was message boards. It was forums, right? One of our first contracts was with Unilever Campaign for Real Beauty back in 2005. Many of the women in the room probably are familiar with that campaign, celebrating natural beauty. We moderated their message boards. Today, we moderate their Facebook boards, right? So nothing's really changed, but we've put this big term on it. So again, to measure ROI, I'd say measure your marketing spend. That's what you should be measuring. Your entire marketing spend, and that's a piece of it, right? And let me add to that though, don't just add social on, right? If you think social is important, it needs to be as important as anything else you're doing as marketing. Because if you're just going to add it on, you're going to fail, right? It needs to be culturally part of what you believe in and what you're doing as an organization, right? It needs to be part of what you do. You know, look at the missteps Google has made over the last number of years. They've released a great product this week, which many are thinking is going to work, but you know, their philosophy was, we'll just bolt social on. We'll just bolt it on. It doesn't work that way, right? It's got to be culturally from the core. You got to be a social organization. You got to get it. And you have to understand the whole idea of being social and communicating, responding, engaging. If you're just going to add it on, you're going to fail because you're literally adding on because your neighbor did and your peers did. So there's my little rant.
Just following up on that, so you're saying don't do it as an add-on, but also you get lost if you're not in there with other brands who are doing it. So how do you sell it, per se, to clients who are very new to it and know they need to get into it, but are hesitant because they want to know the ROI?
Yeah.
Which obviously doesn't totally.
Yeah. And it's a question we're often asked as well, which is, you know, how do we get people moving a little faster with it? And it's not easy, frankly, right? You know, 10 or 15 years ago when websites first came out, the same conversation was happening. Oh, do I need a website? You know, my neighbor has one. My competitor has one. I got to have one, right? And for the most part, you know, the web is, we all have websites now, right? So, but the ones that win are the ones that truly embrace them and truly use them for what they are. The ones that fail are the ones that, it's funny, I got to tell you a funny story. So I got a call a few months ago and they said, hey, we should do business together. And I looked and I said, yeah, let's do business together. And I looked at the website and it hadn't been updated in 3 years. It's like, whoa. You guys are a social media company and you haven't updated your content in 3 years? Really? So that to me is like they're just adding it on because they just felt like they had to, right? But they really didn't believe in it. Right? Again, it goes back to my comment about investing in it. If you're going to start a blog is not just starting it and not posting. You're committing to 2, 3, 4 posts every single day to build that audience up, right? Not once a week, not once every 2 weeks, every day. So then we think, what's that investment? Well, who's going to do it? Who's going to create it? Who's going to create the content? Who's going to manage the content? It's easy to set up a WordPress blog. It's easy to set up a Twitter account, but who's going to manage it? And that's the investment, and that's the challenge I know you have when speaking to clients about that, right? Yeah, measuring that. How do I get my money back? Communication channel. Another communication channel is what we often tell people, right? Come on, we're just getting started here. Anything else? John, any questions? No? Awesome, cool. You know what? I'm glad you asked that. The RCMP called me back the next day because I said, could you please call me? Because I explained to him who I was, explained to him what I did. And he's like, wow, it's pretty interesting what you guys are doing. And so he looked into it and he called me the next day and he said, we followed up with the phone, because we had the phone number, right? We traced it back to Ottawa and we had the phone number. So the cops went down to and traced it out and there was nothing there. I didn't know if it was a hoax or what it was, but nothing came of it. But they did call me and follow up, which was kind of neat. So it's as fun when we cross the border as well. So what do you do for a living? Oh, really? You want to know what I do for a living? Yeah. Good one. Yeah. Anything else? I'm enjoying sharing the insight, and I got some time, so let's talk. This is fun.
So I perceive that there's, of course, tremendous benefit between social media, between your company and the public that you serve. But also I see that there's tremendous benefits using social media strictly internal to an organization maybe using tools that aren't Twitter. Like I know Microsoft SharePoint, for example, has a lot of social media-ish stuff in it. So have you seen, number one, a company that would say a multi-thousand person company using social media internally to great benefit? And then the second one is, have you seen that moderated? Because I perceive that, I see how this might happen, moderation might happen between a company and the public, but the speed of business internal to a company might challenge a moderation policy internally.
Yes, great question. We use Yammer. Yammer is basically Twitter for business. It is identical to Twitter, except it's internal for your business. It's set up to your domain. It has been, because we run a virtual office, we don't have an office. People don't congregate around a water cooler, and I'm sure if it's a multi-thousand corporation, they're not all on the same floor, so they're dispersed everywhere. Yammer has been a godsend for creating a social culture out of a virtual company. Right? We employ 200 people around the world, and I've met 10 of them, right? But I know a lot of them through this water cooler, this virtual water cooler of Yammer. Right? So, but then the moderating side of it, I tell you, we've never done any B2B stuff. We've had conversations with it. I had a conversation with a big investment firm out in Toronto about a year ago, and they had the same question about should they be moderating their internal conversations. And the question I asked them was, how are your employees going to feel about that? Right? So, knowing that you're watching what they're saying, because if it's, I'm hopeful that if you're hiring somebody, you're placing a level of trust on them that they're going to speak internally amongst themselves appropriately. So, HR may be involved for watching for content that may be inappropriate internally, but I'm not sure about the moderation side of it. We've talked about it, but I can tell you that we have no experience in moderating a B2B community today. Unless I'm wrong, Jen. No.
I have talked to a lot of people who are doing lots of prospective clients when I've met at conferences about their community forums internally. And most of them say to me that they're not interested in moderating that content, that the reason that they don't do it is because it really cuts off communication. So like Keith was saying, Twitter, Yammer, doesn't matter what it is, it's just a conversation. So you have to imagine it to be identical to Keith and I at the office and me telling about my weekend. If I had to censor my weekend, if I knew that Keith was going to go tell somebody about my weekend, then I probably would never talk to Keith again. So employees don't mind a social media policy. It makes sense to them. And if part of your social media policy is that content that appears internally stays internally, then I think that makes sense. But I think if you're going to start telling people how to talk to each other at the office, which you probably don't do right now working in your office, then you're going to run into some difficulties with your staff. That's personal opinion.
I think we had a second question.
We've been talking a lot about going social and encouraging your employees to tweet. I know at ICUC, all employees are tweeting constantly. I wonder if you have any clients or any case studies of nonprofits that are working with maybe a vulnerable population, at-risk youth, or people with mental health illnesses, where a lot of it is about preserving the dignity of the people that you serve, and how would you advise that company to go about a social media policy? Should their employees tweet, or should they not tweet?
Do you want to? I think that one of the things that really works for ICUC is that we really allow all of our employees to take part in this culture. I think that being a virtual company, it really lends nicely to it, but I think that just because you don't have a virtual company doesn't change things. So if you want to be in social media, if you want to take part in it, then you have to, like Keith said, from the top down, really let people know that it's a part of your culture and you want them to engage in it. Social media policies are really nice and clean in that they can let your employees know what's appropriate and what's not. Most people don't want to look stupid online. So not that there aren't people out there that are, but most people don't want to. They want to look smart. They want to look like they're spreading original content, things that are relevant, things that are new. So I think that allowing your employees to speak online on behalf of your company or say that they work for you, but they're their own personal opinions, lots of people do that, I think that that's great. If they work for you and you hired the right person, they're not going to say that bad stuff. And if they do, you have that social media policy. Do you want to add?
No, I think, again, it goes back to if any other, that same, you're going to have policy in place so when that person gets on the phone, they're saying the right things to either the press or to somebody in the public. So just have some policies defined and ensure that the message that you're getting out is a clear, concise, and consistent message. So.
A question stemming back from the citizen journalism oxymoron. Just kind of flipping back to the citizen journalism oxymoron that John had talked about, wondering what your thoughts are on the citizen monitoring or moderation of the Vancouver riots that took place on Facebook?
Do you mean in terms of how the public really embraced, using Facebook as a tool to I guess, share photos and democratize the whole event? Exactly. It just shows the power of Facebook, right? And it shows how you know that something has power when it has 500 million people in it and they change their privacy policy overnight and nobody blinks, right? You know that there's some influence there. And I think what you see happening in Iran or has happened in Iran and other parts of the world with Facebook as that platform to democratize, I think it's very powerful. And I think it opens a lot of people's eyes to that whole idea of, it's like what happens in Vegas ends up on Facebook, right? What happens at a riot ends up in social media, right? So it's, everybody's carrying a camera phone, right? Everybody's creating content. We live in a world of content. So I think it's, my opinion is I think it's great that, that platform was used for that experience. I really do. Go Moose.
Back to the subject of Facebook. You mentioned Coke, and I'm sure you have other clients with pretty significant Facebook fan pages. I'm just curious to know your opinion, experience, like monitoring fan pages. Like, is it standard just every time someone drops an F-bomb, like just get rid of the comment? If they do it too many times, ban them? Or more or less, I'm just looking for your opinion on how to monitor.
Sure, good question. So again, we're talking monitoring and moderating, and I want to kind of get tactically specific with you here. So moderating is content we're controlling on your own Facebook page, right? Monitoring is listening to conversations that's happening across the social web that you have no control over. So one stat I heard this week was there's 700 million fans on Facebook, and what is it? We're doing 277 million of them?
We're moderating more like 400.
So out of the 700 million people on Facebook, out of all the fan pages that we're fortunate to moderate, let me talk about some of them. Walt Disney, Starbucks, Chevron, lots. Big ton of them. So just 400 million of the 700 million. They all have different policies, right? Starbucks content needs to be down within 15 minutes. And as we know in the Facebook world, it goes up live, right? So there's no pre-moderated world. I'll tell you right now, the pharmaceutical industry is trembling in their boots. For those of you that don't know, the pharmaceutical industry up until now has had the ability to turn comments off their wall, right? So they can go to Facebook and say, we don't want comments showing up on our Facebook wall because we're scared of what people might say because of their regulated industry, adverse events, both at the U.S. and Canada. Facebook made an announcement 2 weeks ago that policy is changing. You don't have the option to turn comments off. So right now, the pharmaceutical companies, we've been talking to many of them right now because they're going, oh my God, we need help, right? And it's funny, I'll tell you a true story. We were down at Pfizer in Jersey last summer, and I went in there with the perception of your risk is high, we're going to moderate it in real time. So content goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down. Anything adverse event, we'll report it up through an escalation policy. Their lawyer comes back and says, not 12 hours is fine. I'm like, oh, really? 12 hours? So your risk level is that if you put something up there, it's going to come down within 12 hours. He's like, yeah, I think it's okay. Now, the brand we were talking about is a very low-risk brand, but still anything can happen, right? But everybody's different. Some are 15 minutes, some are 4 hours, some are 12 hours. Some clients are real-time. The question I always ask somebody is, how uncomfortable are you with inappropriate content on your site? If you go to your site and you see a penis there, are you happy? No. And if it sits up there for hours, are you happy? No. You want it down quickly. How quick is that? Right? So it's just understanding what your level of risk is, and then we or somebody can respond to that. Okay? And it's different for everybody. Just like moderation guidelines are different for everybody. People think that we censor the public because of the way we moderate. We're just going off somebody's guidelines, right? The CBC has a page of 80 pages of guidelines for how we moderate their content. So, anything else? I think we'll wrap it up. More? Good.
You mentioned in an earlier slide that you manage brands, some on Facebook. Do you ever write any of the content for them?
Me personally?
Well, ICUC as an organization, and if so, how do you do that with the distance between you and the organization?
Question better answered for, probably asked for Jan, but I'll try. Jan's our VP of Client Services at ICUC, employee number 2, so she's been with us really since day 1. We do post content on behalf of brands. Often it's via a content calendar. It's not something that Jan and her team make up and say, hey, let's post this today on behalf of Coke. Right? It's a very disciplined calendar. It's a content calendar. Pre-created content's been approved by a marketing team, right? But for the most part, it's exactly how it works. As simple as that. It's pre-approved content, and then sometimes with clients, we'll get into an engagement procedure where you may want to engage with the brand. We'll grab that content, escalate it up through a process to a certain division at the brand. They'll send a response back to us. We'll respond on behalf of the brand. But I think the second part of your question was how do we as a company respond culturally? We do a lot of culture training. When we landed Chevron, myself, Jan, and one of our other gals went down to San Ramon, California for half a week to really spend some time training with Chevron, going through their employee training so that we can really digest as much of that brand as possible. We actually have an employee working in the Coke office in Atlanta. So he's kind of integrated as part of their social team, but works for us, but as part of their social team really to kind of get that brand consistent message across.
Okay, well, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I want to thank all of the companies that participated today. So John, thank you. Matt, thank you for doing everything, and John White, wherever he is. I'd also like to thank the kitchen and everybody from the cafe for whipping up some delicious foods for us. So thank you back there. And then I just want to thank all of you for coming out and celebrating Social Media Day with us today. I also just want to remind you that there is a tweet up tomorrow going on for Social Media Day, and you can find it online, Social Media Manitoba, and it's happening tomorrow night. So everybody should come out if they can, and have a really great long weekend, everybody. Be safe.